Ever watched your Law 250,000 emergency helicopter go up in flames because Linda from the HOA thought it clashed with the neighborhood VYB? Yeah, that's when I knew this was war, the kind where you bring lawyers, leverage, and federal authority. Freeze frame. That's me, the guy whose private well Linda illegally tapped into to water her precious garden. What did I do? I flushed her system with sewage runoff, and oh man, that was just the warm-up. It all kicked off 4 months ago when I moved into one of those neighborhoods where every mailbox is the same shade of mind-numbing beige, and the lawns are clipped to HOA-approved perfection like a buzz cut for grass. I was after peace, quiet, and a spot to park my helicopter. Not some billionaire showpiece. I am not that dude. I'm the director of tactical airlift for Homeland Security, which is a long-winded way of saying I figure out how to drop 100 tons of life SAVYing gear into disaster zones when everything goes sideways. My chopper? Part of a federally funded disaster response program, one of 3 retrofitted Chinooks in the area. Flood season was looming, and I wasn't storing it for kicks. I was gearing up to save lives. Try telling that to Linda, though. Linda's not her real name, but it suits her. HOA president, clipboard enthusiast, obsessed with community aesthetics, and incapable of minding her own business. The day after I moved in, she sent a letter. Not a welcome to the neighborhood, note of fine. My helipad, a fully permitted concrete pad out back, was apparently unauthorized infrastructure and VY Sewell vandalism. Her words. I figured it was a mix-up, maybe some HOA overreach. So I responded politely, sent her the FAA permits, local zoning approval, even the Department of Homeland Security contract with the official seal. I offered to sit down and explain it, like adults. Her reply? She doubled the fine, claiming she didn't recognize federal clearance as an exemption from HOA rules, like saying you don't believe in taxes. Cute, but reality doesn't care. Things escalated when I put up motion-sensing floodlights around the helipad standard safety stuff. Linda complained they ruined her evening wine ambience. That was the actual phrase in her filing, wine ambience. Her husband, Greg, the HOA VYC president, in a walking argument that jellyfish grew spines before he did, started creeping around my property line with a tape measure and a notepad, muttering about setbacks and shading zones. Then came the water stunt. I noticed my well pressure dropping, thought it was a leak at first. Nope. Linda had hired a crew to tap into my private well, running a hidden line to her backyard sprinklers. Illegal, quiet, and bold as hell. I could have called the cops or confronted her, but something told me to get creative. So I rigged a bypass valve and flushed her line not with water, but with gray water from my septic test tanks. Not pure sewage, but close enough to make her roses smell like a gas station bathroom for weeks. Her sprinklers? Let's just say the wine ambience took a permanent hit. You'd think that'd be the end of it, that she'd realize she'd messed with the wrong guy. But Linda wasn't rational. She was a petty dictator in leggings, powered by herbal tea and HOA bylaws. The real explosion literal this time came 2 weeks after I got back from a federal drill. I landed the chopper, did my post-flight checks, and went inside for a shower. 30 minutes later, the neighborhood reeked of burning oil and molten aluminum. I ran out, barefoot, shampoo still dripping, to see my Chinook swallowed by flames. Not a small fire, a full-on inferno. The fire department was there. Linda was there too, smirking. I'll never forget her words. I warned you it was a hazard, so we had it removed. Removed. They'd called a scrap crew, claimed it was an abandoned military vehicle, towed it with shoddy rigging that ruptured the fuel line, then somehow decided to dispose of it in a controlled burn on HOA land. No permits, no safety measures, no clue they'd just torched a federal asset worth $250,000. I stood there, soaked and stunned, as a firefighter explained. One whispered off the record that the HOA president had insisted they handle the eyesore before it attracted criminals, as if a helicopter draws thieves like a porch light pulls moths. Greg handed me another fine. Dula $115,000 for improper vehicle storage. Deadpan, like this wasn't complete madness. That's when I quit playing nice. They thought I was some hobbyist with a flying toy. They didn't know every bolt on that Chinook was federally registered, that its destruction triggered a VYEW, or that I had the kind of job where one call could unleash a legal storm thick enough to bury their little HOA newsletter. But I held off. I wanted to see how far they'd push it, let them dig a hole so deep even Greg's tape measure couldn't reach the bottom. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at the smoldering wreck of what used to be the region's top rescue asset. I wasn't mad he was strategizing. This wasn't just about the chopper, the water theft, or the fines. It was about power. Linda wanted to run this place like her personal fiefdom, and she thought I'd bow. Wrong guy, Linda. The next morning, I fired off 5 reports. 1 to the FAA, 1 to DHS Internal Investigations, 1 to the local zoning board, 1 to FEMA's infrastructure compliance team, and a sharp letter to the HOA's insurance pro VYDR hinting at a multi-million-dollar liability claim. By noon, a federal investigator called. "Mr. Carter, we've seen your file. This is bad for them." I sipped my coffee and smiled. I know. Then, as I was closing my laptop, a notification popped up from the HOA board portal. A new rule, effective immediately, banning all non-standard vehicles, trailers, RVs, emergency trucks, and, yes, aircraft. Linda wasn't retreating. She was doubling down, declaring war. Did I mention her HOA charter sat on floodplain land under federal oversight? That little detail was about to bite her hard. Linda's first mistake was thinking a burned-up federal helicopter was just another neighborhood annoyance she could squash with a vote. Her second was forgetting that while most folks dread the HOA, I'm the guy Homeland Security calls when a coastline floods. She had bylaws and Greg. I had jurisdiction and receipts. I laid out my plan like a military op, filing every permit, contract, and waiver into a dossier dubbed Operation Linda Fallout. This wasn't a petty spat, Anna Maria, it was a federal case. The FAA jumped first. That Chinook wasn't just a rescue bird. It was a regionally deployable emergency asset. Wrecking it carried federal weight. My report included satellite shots of the burned site, security footage of the tow truck rolling in, and Linda's social media post crowing about removying that ridiculous eyesore. Greg chimed in online about beautifying the neighborhood, while someone else joked about lighting it up like Independence Day. The FAA agent I spoke to was floored. "You're saying an HOA ordered the destruction of a registered airlift vehicle?" "Yep." I added that it was insured for disaster readiness, critical for the flood season it wouldn't see. Damage estimate? Due law $14 million. Give or take some melted of VY Onyx. Next, I hit DHS Legal. This was now an infrastructure failure, and with FEMA's recent approval of my helipad as a staging site, they carried a lot. The Zoning Commission got a packet too. Linda's new rules hadn't been community voted, breaking state law, and the burn site sat on a federal flood buffer zone. Oh, and I asked the HOA's insurer if they knew their policy might now cover destroying government gear, obstructing emergency protocols, and misusing restricted land. By midweek, their agent left a shaky voicemail wanting to clarify the events. Translation: Linda had dragged them into a legal nightmare, and they were scrambling. She had no clue. That Thursday, her flyer went out Comic Sans, clip art flag, bragging about restoring order by removying an unauthorized military vehicle. She threw a barbecue to celebrate. I wasn't in VY Ted, but I heard the bounce house popped and a kid sobbed into the potato salad small VY Tories. Greg sauntered by my place with a smirk. "Looks like your bird flew off, huh?" I grinned from my grill. "No, Greg, it was shot down. Now they're hunting the shooter." He blinked, confused, and shuffled away. Monday, a black SUV with DHS jackets rolled up. 2 agents, a zoning official, and a compliance officer strolled past Linda's roses still recovering from their septic bath. She stumbled out in a robe, green juice in hand, and dropped it when she saw them. They calmly requested board records, amendment docs, and site permits. One snapped photos of the burned site. Another asked Linda to explain her authority over federal property. She mumbled about beautification, but the agent just nodded and wrote it down. Her face went pale when they said the chopper's destruction was a federal matter. She tried blaming confusing paperwork, but the EVY Denke wasn't buying it. Her control unraveled. Board members quit. An anonymous note hit the bulletin board. "Linda doesn't speak for us." But she dug in, holding an emergency vote with just Greg and one loyalist, banning me from amenities and fining me for biohazard retaliation over the sprinklers. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. She still thought this was about egos, not realizing I was stacking legal ammo while she scribbled fines. Then DHS sent her a cease and desist. Stop messing with emergency infrastructure or face charges. She called it deep state junk mail gutsy for a letter with a federal seal. 2 days later, a federal caravan arrived. SUVs, zoning van, environmental investigator, FEMA official. Linda tried blocking them with a gnome and a chair. They moved the gnome, handed her a clipboard, and audited everything: records, policies, land use. Her insurance got suspended, Leah VYing the board personally liable. By week's end, more resignations hit, and the treasurer posted an apology online, accusing Linda of rigging votes and abusing power. She tried deleting it, but screenshots spread. Meanwhile, I met with FEMA and pitched a rebuilt helipad, a water unit, and a bigger staging area. They loved it, named me their liaison, GIVYing me authority to override HOA moves in emergencies. At the next meeting, Linda floundered. I asked if they'd budgeted for lawyers or were crowdfunding. A FEMA rep stood up, recognized me, and said HOA interference could trigger federal REVYUs. Silence. Power shifted. The HOA retracted their fines, apologized, and crumbled. Linda's house got a lien, her accounts froze, and she fled town only to join another HOA elsewhere. She sent me a personal cease and desist, blaming me for memes mocking her. I framed it next to my DHS liaison certificate. She'd burned her empire down, and I'd just stood there, letting her light the fuse. If she's out there now, glaring at another chopper, pinning another letter, good luck. I've got federal clearance, and she's still just Linda with a clipboard.